Hello everybody. This video is about why the Constellations, Royal Enfield Constellations, could, would and did blow up. So let's get into that. Right, I've got here a set of Constellation cases. Look very nice, don't they? But there's a problem with these. I'll show you what it is. Can you see that big hole in the crankcase there? That's where it let go of a conrod and chucked it out through the bottom of the cases, or through the front of the cases, which they could do. And I'm going to explain why they did this. But you've got to go back to the three models that they did, the Meteor, the Super Meteor and the Constellation. Now each one as it came out had more horsepower and more performance than the previous model. Now they kept tuning them until it culminated in the Constellation, which is these cases here. So right, so if you're advertising a bike that's got more performance than the previous model, the people that are going to buy it are going to want to use that performance, aren't they? It's just human nature, isn't it? If you want something to go faster than the old model, then you buy the new model, don't you? So people bought the Constellation and they wanted to see what it would do flat out, and they did, and that's when the problem started. These have all got the same design characteristics. All the twins, all the Redditch twins, all had the same design characteristics. You can see that's the scruffy old Meteor, Super Meteor engine, and that's the Constellation. It's all the same, exactly the same. And we've got to come down to the oil pumps now. This is the casing off this old tired old well, it's not tired because it's gone no miles, this one, but this is the timing cover off this bike, and this holds the, put it down, I don't want to damage the faces of it, but this holds the feed pump and the return pump, and that's driven off a shaft, just the same as a bullet, exactly the same as a bullet. And they've got little reciprocating pumps in there. I've taken the end cover off here so you can see. Let's get it up, and I can show you if I can get the light on it. Jam my foot underneath it so you can see. This one is the, hang on, let's have a look at it. This one is the return pump. I'm trying to get it so you can, and there's a little reciprocating pump in there, and it's exactly the same at the other end. And these are driven by the oil pump drive shaft, which is, I have to keep putting stuff down, which is that bit there. And that is driven off a worm on the end of the crank, which is, let's get onto it, is that. It's all covered in dust, this bike, this engine. That's the worm that drives the oil pump drive shaft. So well, so good. It worked for the bullet, so it should work for the twin, shouldn't it? So, why didn't it? Well, on the bullet, the drive from the end of the crank to the oil pump drive shaft, it drives the oil pump drive shaft at a 12th of what the engine speed is. So in other words, every time the engine on a bullet fires 6 times, the oil pump does 1 stroke, which is not a huge amount of oil, but it's enough. And that works, because I mean, if you ride a bullet at 5,000 revs, and you're a brave man if you do, the oil pumps are fine, they're no problem. Now, on the twins, they changed the drive ratio between the worm and the oil pump drive shaft in here, so that it pumps twice as fast. It's 2-cylinder, so it obviously wants twice the amount of oil, doesn't it? So these are driven at 1/6 of engine speed. So every time the engine fires 3 times, the oil pump's gone round once. Now, so you're out on your new Constellation and you've run it in and you want to know what it will do flat out. So you wind it right up. Now you probably get up to about 5,000 revs. Might get up a bit more. But at 5,000 revs, this little oil pump, which you can see here, which I might be able to turn by hand, and see how it works. The shaft is just connected, it's got a pin on the end of the shaft and it's hooked into the little conrod, say, of the plunger, and the disc moves backwards and forwards. Now this is the bigger one of the pumps because it's the scavenge side, so it's got to pick up more oil than the feed side, otherwise you'll end up loading oil in the crankcase. Right, so it's all well, all good, isn't it? But you're on your Constellation and you've got it up to its maximum speed, 110, 115 mile an hour, whatever you're going to get out of it. Now, if you're doing about 5,000 revs, bearing in mind that this oil pump drive shaft is driving the pumps twice as fast as a bullet, then this oil pump drive shaft and the pump, that pump at 5,000 revs is pumping at 27 strokes per second. Now that is a horrendous speed for a piston pump, and you get the problem then of cavitation. How do I explain cavitation if you don't know what that is? If you're trying to suck a liquid from somewhere, if you put too much vacuum, especially if it's a piston pump, if you've got so much vacuum on that liquid can actually sort of boil and make bubbles. So you're actually pumping a load of bubbles really, rather than you are oil, because bearing in mind that it's not a smooth flow from the oil tank to the pumps. It stops. I mean, as the pump goes round, it's drawing in oil now, so the oil's coming along the galleries. Then it stops pumping. It's actually pumping it into the engine now, and now it's got to refill the cylinder again. Meanwhile, that oil stopped in the galleries and it hasn't moved. So you're on your next stroke and it's suddenly got to pick up that oil and get it moving again to fill the space up where the little plunger is. Well, at 27 times a second, I mean, if you imagine that you could run this engine and have this oil pump cover off, you wouldn't see anything in there. That would just be an absolute blur. Well, that is where the problem stems from. Cavitation of the oil pumps. And I know they do it because a couple of my Enfield twins, Redditch twins, I'll put an oil gauge on each one, and you've got probably 20 pound pressure to the big end with the engine idling, and as the revs go up, the oil pressure goes down, and about 4,700 revs you've hardly got anything registering on the gauge, and at 5,000 there isn't anything registering on the pressure gauge. It's all gone. So if you're running your Constellation absolutely round to the stop, because the dealer said it will do 110 mile an hour, you're going to want to see that 110 mile an hour, but you've got to be aware of what's happening in the engine. And this really was the Achilles heel of the twins. The medium miners didn't blow up because nobody rode them that hard. They were a 500 and, you know, people just didn't buy them to ride them that hard. But the Constellations, the performance 700s, they got a hell of a life, and a lot of them did do this. They did blow up. These cases are pretty much scrapped now, but you know, once they've chucked a rod out, they've chucked a rod out, and they shame really, but there we are. But that is a victim of what's happened, and it's always their main bearings. They're good size, aren't they? They're all like that on the twins. Beefy bottom end, but spoilt by the oil pumps. On low output engines, these reciprocating pumps are fine, like the bullets. The 350s, the 500 bullets, brilliant. No problem at all. The only problem you'll get is if the pumps wear out after thousands and thousands of miles, they get a bit of room in there and they won't pump the oil then. But you keep an eye on them. And they're cheap to buy, they're not expensive. So, that is why the Constellations, I mean, any of the twins would blow up if you thrashed them, absolutely thrashed them within the inch of their life, because all the twins, the oil pump drive shaft is a 6th engine speed instead of a 12th, like the bullets were, and that's what caused the problems. And of course, if you chuck the rod out, then you strip the engine down and you can't find anything wrong. But that is what's happening. That's what's happening. So I know only 1 or 2 of you watching this will ever have a Constellation, but there is 1 or 2 people that have. But just be aware that the surviving Constellations are only here because the people didn't thrash them. So there we are. Just a bit of information for you. If you ride them sensibly, they last. They're not, no problem. No more problem than the bullet. It's only when you rag them to death you'll have problems. So I hope this helps somebody. And it's something else that I don't have to keep remembering to make a video about, and I can get rid of it. So there we are. I will get on with this. I've accumulated some more bits. I've got a set of primary chain cases and an exhaust system for it now that have turned up, and another spare clutch, and also a pair of new pistons as well, which I probably won't use in this one. But so we're getting on with it. Well, we're getting the bits together, and then I can make a start on it then. So there we are. A bit of history of what happens in the Royal Enfield bullets, and I've proved it all with pressure gauges, so I know what's happening in there. So okay, well, I'll let you go and carry on doing what you're doing there. You can go and watch something else now, can't you? Bye bye.